Popular history often anchors the arrival of Christianity in India to the age of European empires. We associate the faith with Portuguese galleons, French missions, or British colonial officials settling in for tea. But the records of those first European explorers suggest a different starting point. When the Portuguese landed in the 16th century, they found a community of over 150,000 Indian Christians already living there. That community traced its history back to the Apostle Thomas, who was recorded to have arrived in India in 52 AD. This was just 25 years after the death of Jesus, placing the origin of the Indian Church earlier than many of the major traditions in Europe. Shifting the timeline back 15 centuries changes the context of the faith's presence in the country. It places the arrival of Christianity long before the era of Western conquest and colonial expansion. To understand how a first-century arrival was possible, we have to look at the logistical connections of the ancient world. During this period, oceanic trade routes closely linked the Roman and Indian empires. This early history is supported by prominent Indian thinkers. Swami Vivekananda noted that about 25 years after the death of Jesus, Christianity reached India through his disciple, Thomas. Around 45 AD, a navigator named Hippalus discovered the seasonal monsoon trade winds, turning the Indian Ocean into a rapid maritime corridor to the Malabar Coast. Thomas traveled this route because ancient trade relations had created scattered Jewish settlements along the Indian coastline. Thomas traveled these established routes to reach those communities. His mission was to announce to these diaspora groups that the promised Messiah had arrived. This early expansion shows the spread of the faith followed the pre-existing logic of the global marketplace. The movement of the religion was tied to the infrastructure of international trade. This timeline is validated by a continuous chain of archaeological and textual evidence that stretches across several centuries. Archaeological excavations have uncovered coins belonging to a king named Gondophares, who began his reign in 32 AD. This discovery confirms the political landscape described in early texts concerning Thomas's visit to North India. By the 2nd century, the textual record shows an organized presence. Records indicate that between 180 and 190 AD, Indian Christians sent a request to the Bishop of Alexandria asking for a missionary for their community. This request was documented and confirmed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, one of India's most influential historical and legal scholars. Sociological evidence also further supports this continuity. Between the 4th and 8th centuries, records describe waves of Christian migrants arriving on the Malabar Coast and assimilating into the local population. This unbroken sequence, from 1st century coins to 8th century migrations, indicates a persistent Christian presence in the region long before the arrival of the first European ships. How did this community survive and grow for over 1,000 years without the protection of a Western empire? The historical record suggests that the faith thrived because of the protection and tolerance offered by Hindu emperors. One of the most significant pieces of evidence is the 9th century Kottayam copper plates. These records show Hindu kings officially granting land, funds, and special status to Christian communities. Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan pointed to these plates as proof of a long-standing Indian tradition of religious integration and royal support for the faith. By the time European explorers finally established their own institutions in the 1500s, they were building upon a history of native Christianity that had already existed in India for more than a millennium. The evidence reveals that Christianity is an ancient component of the Indian religious landscape. Its roots were established through trade and royal protection centuries before the influence of Western colonialism reached the subcontinent.